Hi everyone. Today I'm super excited to introduce you to Sheree Ann. And Sheree has been a super yacht chef working on some really high performance sailing boats. Anyone that wants to go from high-end hotels into a galley on a 45-degree slope must be bonkers. I've tried it with a few Hobarts, but she's been doing it for years and mastered the art. And needless to say, has got really into psychology and mindset, and is also a mindset coach. But how about you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey guys. So thank you for the beautiful intro. I'm Sheree. I am a yacht chef. I've been on boats for it would be shivers coming up like 15, 16 years. And yeah, it's just been an incredible journey. I started out cooking in restaurants, never even considered yachting. But yeah, I've been in the industry for coming up 15 years. It's been an amazing journey.
And what was it that inspired you to get into yachting? How did you actually, because you were a professionally trained chef, right? And how did you
Yeah.
go from the kitchen in a hotel to a super yacht?
Oh yeah, I love this story. So I was actually on Daydream Island in the Whitsundays, and I'd never heard of chefing on a boat. I didn't even think that was a thing. But when I started chefing, I really had this vision that I was going to try all types of chefing, like as in cafes, restaurants, high-end restaurants, low end. I wanted to try it all. And one of my friends just talked about doing a charter on a yacht. And I was like, what is that? What do you mean you're cooking on a boat? And he told me, and I thought, wow, that sounds pretty cool. Let's see if there's anything around. Because once I kind of commit and decide, I just take action to get there. So it was a goal to get on a boat. So I looked in back in the Whitsundays back then, there weren't crew agents. We had the Whitsunday News or whatever, Whitsunday Times. Had a look in the Whitsunday Times. There was a job on a 33-meter, three-masted Turkish schooner called Good Old Whitsunday Magic. And there was a chef job going. So I applied, I got it. And that's how I got started. And that was more in the, backpacker scene, 24 to 30 guests, mixture of like buffet and a la carte style things. And then someone told me about super yachting, and all the benefits, you get actual sick leave, holidays. And I was like, oh, I want to go check out the EU scene. So, but yeah, that's how I got started, was just through hearing about it through a friend, because I had no idea that this was a thing.
And then you got to work with, the J class regattas and America's Cups and some super yacht cups and on basically some of the best sailing yachts in the world, which is how I've met you.
Yeah.
Getting to the point of resilience, reflecting on your career, could you describe a specific incident that challenged your resilience at sea or in the world of yachting?
Specific for that.
So an
Um,
accident, a tragedy, a
yep.
stressful situation.
Yeah. Okay. So there's definitely a few, but like a main one would have been like just before, it's 12 years now. So just before I was moving from the Whitsundays to come over to Europe. Um, I was doing a charter with one of my housemates. He was a chef also, like a really incredible chef. And he was meant to be taking over my position when I was leaving the yacht. On the last night of charter, unfortunately, he drowned and we lost him. So that, without a doubt, is the most challenging situation I've ever been in during and the after effects. I mean, the after effects, reflecting back, have probably been years, probably took a good couple of years. That would probably be my number one.
And yeah, of course, it's huge. What a way to get into the industry. I think it's so resilient, shows so much resilience that you stayed. How did you cope with the aftermath of that incident?
So, we were provided with a bit of counseling. I've always been quite a strong-willed, hard-headed person. So I had a lot of other people to look after in that situation. That, a few friends that were also on board that felt a lot of like guilt and did they do enough? So I was kind of like I felt I needed to be strong in order for everyone else to break down, basically. So, and allow them space to break down and share their emotions and their grief and everything. So how did I deal with it? Was just being strong. And I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't recommend shutting off your emotions. I probably did that for a good year, a year and a half, before I really let myself properly grieve and take on the emotions that I was feeling, which of course, when you lose a friend and you replay that situation over and over again, thinking, could I have changed something? What if I told him to go down first instead of me going down first? To sleep in the cabins. There was that sliding doors. What if, for years. So it was a lot of counseling helped to an extent. We had one session. And then it was a lot of internal work with a one-on-one coach, to be fair, which I got a couple of years later. We did a lot of like NLP sort of things, going back to that event, like rewiring things that I created of a lot of things and guilt and beliefs around myself and my ability to help other people from that event. So we really worked on rewiring it and just letting go of all the guilt. So it was really deep work, and just allowing myself. How I built the resilience was actually by letting go. And I used to think that by having resilience was being strong and being the leader that I felt I had to be in that situation. And sometimes by building resilience, what I really learned is that we let to feel the freaking emotions so we can actually let them go, because the longer I was putting it off, the worse it was getting.
It really sounds like you built some very strong personal traits and strategies after that event. So looking back to the version of you that dealt with that 12 years ago and who you've become now through counseling, I didn't want to laugh at anything with this conversation, but when you said you had one session, it's so often the way, isn't it? Oh, we had one session where, it takes such a long time with an experienced and qualified psychologist or psychiatrist to open that can of worms, which you found later with your coaching. If that was to happen today, how would you deal with that differently, and how would you now help the people on board that you're surrounded with rather than being strong?
Yeah. So first of all, in order to help myself, I would get actual long-term support. That counseling session we got was actually a group session for all the crew on board. And I'm so grateful that was supplied. And, it was an emergency session that the bosses wanted to get us into. But I think and feel, and reflecting back on the group session, is once again, I was being so strong for everyone else. I held space for them, but I didn't give space for myself to be seen and heard. Yeah. I was letting everyone else take their time. And I thought I was doing the right thing back then, but I wasn't, because I was just shutting things off, just becoming like a closed book, basically. So what I would do is step one is I would have the one-on-one support, 100%. Everything I've shifted through in my life has been quickly and properly, has been one-on-one. Whatever beliefs, emotions, events, it's been one-on-one. So I would get the one-on-one support where I have the container and the space to be seen and heard as an individual and not in a group. I'd also allow myself to feel the actual emotions instead of trying to block them off and thinking I was strong and resilient for blocking them off, because it wasn't resilient and it wasn't strong. And it just had such negative effects on my body in the end. When you're carrying around that sort of stress and guilt, it just doesn't work. How I would help others is just hold space for them and let them know. I think a lot of what I've noticed, especially supporting a lot of people at one-on-one for different things, is we really need to be inviting people to open up, having safe spaces and encouraging people to share. because a lot of the time when we're having conversations, it's very surface level. What'd you do on the weekend? How many years have you been in yachting? You know, and this isn't just this industry, it's a lot of everyday things. We're just like quick, surface level. Where'd you go to school? What's your first name? That sort of vibe. So when those sort of things happen, or even before, open up space to truly get to know people. Open up space for them to be open and vulnerable. Let them know you're a safe person to talk to. I mean, I find a lot of time offline and online and on the yachts, a lot of people will come to me. They'll come into the galley and they'll share what they're going through. Now, of course, I need to protect my energy. And there's certain things I do to make sure that I'm protected and grounded. And that's more my own inner work, my routines, and having time for myself. But when people feel safe, they're going to open up. So when those sort of events happen, I really invite you to let your crew know that you're a safe person to talk to, one-on-one, not take people aside, but, have those sort of conversations with people, letting them know it's safe to express how they're feeling. And if you don't feel safe with other people expressing how they're feeling, it's probably because when you were a child or something like that you were told it's not safe to express your emotions. I mean, a lot of us were told that as children, let's be real, that it's, don't cry, stop crying, stop showing which is basically telling people to stop showing their emotions. So I just really invite you to let people know it's okay to cry and have a breakdown and have that sort of moment, because that's where the release comes. When you're blocking off the emotion, it's going to keep coming. If you feel it and let it out of your body, that's the game changer. And that's what I've learned, is to stop suppressing and just let it flow through.
I've interviewed a couple of chefs and interestingly, who've all gone down the route of psychology, mindset, mental health, psychological first aid, coaching work. And it really feels like the chef is often like the Mother Earth, or the safe space on the yacht. And having done a little bit of ocean racing cooking, that was something I always tried to really take on as my role, because as you know, there's plenty of pros. One thing that's often missing in these environments is that safe, homey place where people can come and take their shoes or boots off and take their life jacket off and nearly come to mum give a hug. So you're cooking, you're probably doing watches if you're at sea, or you're doing the food and racing. You're doing, I know you're often doing 18-hour days, plus you're taking on and allowing yourself to be the support network for, anywhere between 6 and 30 crew. How do you prepare yourself mentally and emotionally before embarking on a voyage, knowing the risks involved?
Yeah. So mentally, I make sure, maybe this sounds a bit woo-woo, because years ago it would have sounded woo-woo to me, is I make sure I'm grounded. So a lot of the time we're on boats, we're on water, we're actually a bit ungrounded because we're not getting connection to the earth. And I never noticed this up until like about 6 to 12 months ago, to be fair. So what I do and what helps support me is any moment I can, so get outside and I put my feet on the earth, especially in the sand or it's in the dock. And I just connect to the ground so I can, just feel it. Just instantly help. Looking at the sun and having your bare feet on the earth instantly switches. If you're feeling like anxious or anything like that, or a bit high strung and on high, like a high energy because you've been go, promise you, if you just take your shoes off, they're probably off already because you're on the boat, go on the dock if you can, look at the sun, and it just totally re-anchors you. I also use like a frequency device to make sure everything's operating right, which might sound a bit random, but I found, especially on charter, that's helped a lot. I use like the Healy, so that frequency device. I find journaling is quite
I'll just put in there because there's a lot of science-based people listening. It's basically a TENS machine on steroids. You know, it's not even woo-woo. It's the same sort of device we use for sports injuries. It just has a few extra applications that are really good at bringing an electrical current to help with that grounding at sea. Yeah.
yeah, it's incredible. It really is incredible. And then I love having time for myself in the morning, because there's a cliche saying, the cute saying of, in order to pour into other people's cups, you need to fill your own. And I know that to be true for me 100%. Being someone that people feel very comfortable in speaking to, which I find it an absolute honor. I mean, I've had stewardesses come to me having panic attacks and anxiety attacks. I've had to coach them through it. And it's an absolute honor that people feel safe to come and do that with me and say, I'm feeling this, I'm going through this. I can't tell anyone else. It's an honor, but I know I need to be in the right energy. So I make sure I have time for myself, whether it's having a coffee or a cacao, some movement on deck, any kind of outside time. If I've had time for me, I can pour into other people. It's with anything I do, you know. I have to have time for myself before I can pour into someone else's. Because if my energy's not right, I can't serve anyone else, whether it's like cooking or, you know, being a support system for someone. So those are probably like my few tips. Whatever feels best for you, take time for yourself.
Well, it sounds like you've really nurtured and developed self-care in this journey, and that takes a lot. You don't just sort of wake up with those skills, but maybe the next generation will with with the awareness around the need for self-care, especially in high-performing situations like working on super yachts. But when there is an adverse situation or a critical incident, or even just a stressful situation, which regattas, deliveries, and generally life on board, serving the rich and famous, and you know, the crazy demands of the industry, who or what who do you turn to for support and guidance during difficult moments on board?
Yeah. So a lot of the time I tend to have a coach of some kind, whether it's like mindset or strategy, and I know I can kind of go to that person. Otherwise, good friends, especially ones that are really highly into the personal development mindset sort of side, which I am. Or sometimes it's the stewardess, because that's, as a chef, that's who you're seeing like all the time, 24/7, right? Like you're around everyone, but you know, if I have a good relationship with the stewardess, then that's also someone.
So on that note, how important do you think camaraderie and teamwork are in overcoming obstacles at sea and on board?
Oh, it's 10 out of 10 out of importance.
Yeah.
If you don't have the connection with each other and something happens, whether it's life-threatening or not, I find it's really hard to pull together as a team with people you're not familiar with, you don't have a connection with, you don't have a relationship or some kind of bond with. It's key. I feel it's life-changing. It would change the results of the situation if you didn't have that bond of some kind, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of
Especially
our
reflecting.
break, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
I
if you
mean,
were jumping on a new crew and you didn't know anyone, and everyone was sort of flying in from all different boats and corners of the world, and you were diving straight into a busy season, like we see on Below Deck, and as we know, which happens regularly, how would you cultivate that camaraderie and start trying to glue the crew together? Do you just see if it happens naturally? Or is there anything you do deliberately? Because you mentioned before, a lot of the time we don't know each other's parents' name. We don't know, we might know what town they come from. We don't know their dog. We don't know which school they went to. We don't know anything about them except who they show up as at that time. How do you try and bring the crew together as someone that obviously has a high value in camaraderie and teamwork?
Yeah. So there's two different, sometimes I do see if it happens naturally. And I've been on, I remember this boat in Florida. It happened like that. I mean, it was amazing. It was like instant connection, instant bond. We were all, and maybe that's because we were just a very busy, busy charter boat flying by the seat of our pants, doing back-to-back things that we knew in order to get to where we wanted to be. We got to go together. But we did actually all know each other quite deeply also. So it kind of depends on the people, right? There's some people that will ask a lot of questions and get quite deep, and there's others that won't. And that's perfect either way. But we naturally had a high percentage of the crew that were quite emotionally intelligent and really like would ask more high-end questions to get to know people. Just trying to reflect on that boat.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the deepest like connecting boats I've ever been on, to be fair. So if that's not, and a lot of the time it is happening naturally and naturally enough that there is camaraderie in a relationship and a bond. If I didn't feel it was happening, then I would probably feel the need to just start getting to know people more and make the effort myself. Because if if no one's asking questions and developing bonds and creating some sort of team camaraderie, then it's kind of up to whoever feels like they're most in their leadership to start it, right? So just start asking the questions, or maybe organizing an activity like a dinner, not like a piss up dinner, but like a dinner, or like bowling or something fun, go-karting, whatever it is, if there was time and space, because sometimes there's not. Sometimes it's, go, go, go. So either of those two things would be.
And then once you've done that, in what ways would you encourage a culture of resilience and adaptability on board?
For me personally, because I'm so into the mindset and more the inner work, I'd probably, and because I've found myself naturally doing this, I quite naturally teach it, is really encouraging everyone to have their own time if they're not already. I do notice a lot of people, crew nowadays, are taking the time to do their workouts on deck before or after the charter day starts or finishes. They go on deck and do the journaling and listen to a meditation or something. So if people aren't doing that, I invite them to, because I know it makes people feel so much better. And when you're feeling better and you've got more energy, you're more resilient.
So true. So looking ahead, how do you envision the future and safety in yachting, and how would you, if it was up to you, build a more resilient culture in the yachting industry?
Yeah. So for me, I feel like it's definitely going in the right direction with a lot more, not so much medical fit. The medical stuff is 110% important. It's imperative on those trainings because they're life-saving. But I am seeing a little bit more of the mindset, emotional intelligence, if we will, coming in. I'd implement that even further, showing people how to deal with negative emotions. There's a lot of like lack of self-worth and self-belief in people, especially when they're jumping into different levels of leadership within their departments. I've seen a lot of that. I'd love to do and see a lot of work on that, to really be encouraging people and showing them how they can move past those blocks, those limitations, and fully step into their leadership role. Because one of the biggest things I hear from chief stews, or new chief stews, sorry, is I don't think I can do this. I don't think I'm meant to be chief stew yet. I don't know if I can do this. But then they're some of the best chief stews. So it's just the BS beliefs. So really helping people acknowledge and see that that's just a fake belief. It's not true. And showing them how to create something more powerful that empowers them to step into that leadership position even more. Because when you're empowered, especially with dealing with high level people like millionaires and billionaires, they can smell it a mile away if you're not in your power and your leadership. And I've always been so careful to ensure that I'm in my right, like, level of leadership and level of power when I'm going to speak to those sort of people. Because they
Yeah.
can smell fear. They can smell uncertainty. They can smell that you're not confident. Like, they can just tell. So I'd love to see that sort of like emotional resilience, if you will, really built into yachting. And I think it's getting there. I can see certain things, but I would, make it a little bit next level.
I love that. That is one topic that no one's brought up on these interviews, and that no one ever. Definitely had people take me aside and say, "This guy's." I've been very lucky with the people I race for, and when I was working on boats on private boats, I've been incredibly lucky. But I have had once or twice a briefing, but never actually a clear coaching about how to deal in those situations, because like you said, sometimes people can smell your weakness, and if and they could take advantage of that as well, and make, especially after a few drinks, possibly even make fun of a young stewardess that feels completely out of her league, trying to open a bottle of wine, or
Yeah.
do her job, but in front of people at such a high level. I think I experienced it more in hotels when I started waitressing, but I think that's a really good point, and something that, yeah, it
Yeah. And if you're
needs
not,
to be unpacked and needs to be brought to everyone's awareness, because if we could
yeah,
cultivate that on board and that be part of the brief and debrief of the season each day, I think that could definitely change the culture of resilience on board. It's a great point.
yeah. And when you're feeling confident, you're less likely to make mistakes. Because when you're feeling unconfident and nervous and frightened or scared or whatever it is, you're more likely to make mistakes that you wouldn't necessarily make,
Yeah.
which makes you feel even more out of place. Then it just snowballs.
Yeah. Then you go in the downward spiral.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today. You brought up some amazing points. It's really valuable. And I really look forward to talking to you more about this, of how we could develop mindset and resilience strategies on board. So thanks, Sheree.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.